All right, I will go ahead and keep admitting people as they come in. Good afternoon, my name is Alexis Martinez, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to Leading Through Universal Design. As a reminder, please use the chat function to ask questions and to engage with our amazing speaker. An evaluation link is available in the session description, so we ask that you complete it at the end of our time together this afternoon. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Jennifer Wilson. Jennifer has been the Director of Student Disability Services at Nova Southeastern in Davie, Florida for some time. She has both her doctorate and her master's degrees from Nova Southeastern. And prior to being at Nova, she was the Assistant Director of the Academic Resource Center at the University of Miami. She is an amazing advocate for students in the educational settings and has been an amazing resource for everyone at Nova Southeastern. And I say that because I had the opportunity to work with her for about 2.5 years. And so I know the amazing work that she's done. Recently, she has expanded her portfolio from working with undergrads and graduate students within the university system to also be working with those in the health sciences and in the medical field. And so she has a huge breadth of working with academic accommodations and helping a variety of academic settings support students. And so with that, I would like you all to welcome Dr. Jennifer Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Hopefully I live up to that introduction in this late part of the afternoon of the conference. So thank you to everyone who is attending. We're going to talk a little bit about universal design and how you can lead with universal design and by example through our circles on our various institutions. See if my technology will work for me here. So we're going to talk about what universal design is. Normally it's referred to as UDL or UDI, so learning or instruction, but that can apply in all different facets, not just in the classroom setting. Learn and discuss some of the best practices specifically to organizations, things like conferences, presentations, panels, induction ceremonies, like how we can apply those best practices in the things that we do with our circles, and discuss the diverse leader needs through these blend flex times, right? Right now through the pandemic, we're working either in Zoom like we are today or Teams or other platforms, and how we're engaging, interacting, and communicating with our students, patients, clients, etc., and humans all around. I will let you know that I encourage you to either raise your hand, use reactions. Alexis will definitely help me keep on track of all the windows going on. If you have anything in the chat box, I'll do my best to either answer it as we're in real time or towards the end. There is transcription, audio transcription at the bottom of your screen. It's not 100% accurate, but it's quite close. I definitely like to put into play what I'm going to discuss and mirror those things that are best practices as we go along. Before I kind of get into all of it, as far as the formal definition of universal design, does anybody in the group have an idea of what universal design is, or they've utilized it before on their campus or in their role, either in the circle or outside of their circle?
I'm actually writing an undergraduate thesis on universal design in restaurants.
Very nice. I can't see everyone and I'm sorry, so I'm not sure who just said that, but thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
I believe that was Rosemary, and Elizabeth said yes. Molly Carlson said, I've learned about it for use in classrooms. Jess Cooper said, is it similar to design thinking process?
Similar, a little different, but that is an interesting one. Not everybody knows that, so that's a good one to bring up. Anybody else? I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, so oh, I hit the button. There we go. So there are three basic principles or primary principles to universal design. And again, I'm taking the L or the I off because it definitely applies in any kind of platform. Is the idea is you want to include everyone. So everyone has the access to the information, the presentation, the lecture, etc. If I was doing this in person and I had people in front of me, I would make sure everybody had a copy, a place to write notes as we went along, and then also have the PDF available for anybody who needed electronically for different reasons. I do that in my role as the Director of Disability Services when I'm teaching my freshman students or when I'm doing presentations like this. I do have this presentation in a few different modalities for different users of different types of assistive technology use. The main three principles is there is representation of information. So there's multiple ways you can get the information as it's happening in real time. The multiple means of action and expression. It happens to define it as student here for a classroom setting, but again, humans need to be able to have that action and expression while engaging. And the last piece is the engagement factor. So that's why I said, use the chat box, use a reaction, raise your hand, speak into your mic. Those are different ways to have that engagement as well as express and have action during this dialogue that we're having today. Now I am going to stop sharing the PowerPoint. I'm going to switch to a video, so please bear with me for 1 second with that lag.
Jennifer, I'm not sure we're getting audio, if there is any in the video. I know there's Jennifer, if you can hear me, just know that we still can't hear audio in the video. Jennifer, we're having some audio issues. I think we lost your audio. Everyone, I'm going to apologize just for the technical difficulty. I do see that I'm not the only one who lost the audio, so just give us 1 second. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Really appreciate it.
In one size, with no talk given.
Now it's working. Excellent. I'll make it larger. I'm sorry, everyone.
That would be crazy, right? Expecting everyone to be able to fit into the same size and express themselves in the same color and style. Yet in many cases, that's exactly what is happening in our education system. When it comes to learning, variability is the rule, not the exception, and our college campuses are now grappling with the demands of an increasingly diverse cohort of learners, with increasing numbers of international students, students from different cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, mature students, and students with disabilities. Despite this, curriculums are still designed for the mythical average learner, and all are expected to engage and learn on the same terms. Not enough flexibility is built in at the design stage to give all students equal opportunities to learn in ways that play to their own strengths. So, how can our institutions respond to these challenges? Enter Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for short. UDL is an educational framework that guides the design of learning goals, materials, methods, and assessments, as well as the policies surrounding these curricular elements with the diversity of learners in mind. The framework was developed by US organization CAST and is based on research in the field of neuroscience. It promotes 3 core principles for educators to build into their teaching practice, calling on them to provide students with multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. The framework includes a set of guidelines on how you can turn these principles into practice. For example, by fostering collaboration with the introduction of group work with clear goals, roles, and responsibilities. By using different types of media to support learning and ensuring that all materials are accessible. And by providing a choice of assessment instruments while maintaining robust learning outcomes. You are probably already including some UDL elements in your practice without realizing it, and there's much more to explore. So don't be afraid to let Universal Design for Learning give you a new lens through which to look at your teaching and learning practice and help you to better reach all of your students. For more information and resources, visit ahead.ie/UDL.
Hopefully now you can hear me. Sorry about that. So what did everybody kind of think of that general piece of knowing a little bit about that? Have you ever done this in practice in any of your roles on campus or with students? Or you've thought about some different ways to engage and use multiple different ways to get the information out? Can anybody give me some examples?
So I'll share that Betsy indicated she really liked the clothing analogy, and it helped her understand the ideas of universal design in a much different way.
Thank you. Anybody else? I do like that video because it talks more about the college setting, which most of us kind of work with that group when we're doing circles and being a part of ODK in general. So I find that it helps a little bit kind of narrow those 3 principles down. Sometimes I think people forget that we are doing some of these things already. It just isn't an automatic thing that we think we're doing universal design. So if is everybody comfortable? Does everybody have what they need? That is how we're doing that. By having those inclusive pieces. And sometimes, you know, we don't think we're doing it, but we are.
Upwork has the world's largest network.
All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and let's see if we can have everybody see it.
While you're working on making that transition, just wrote, I'm more aware in my presentations to include captions routinely rather than asking if someone needs them. I know I now have audio, visual, and captions. Molly also wrote, I think it's important to have a strong understanding of universal design so you automatically apply it all of the time. As opposed to, again, kind of asking first to see if anyone needs it and kind of making it a working assumption.
No, those are all really good points. So thank you for kind of actively participating there. I appreciate that. This is kind of another visual. So I try to do things that are in PowerPoint slides and videos and then also pictures to kind of talk about the idea of universal design. So there's equality, right? Like everybody gets equal access, and that's kind of on the far left. Everyone's in a box, but I'm short, I'm 5'2", so I'd be like the gentleman or little girl in the yellow shorts. I would not be able to see over the fence. Equity is kind of giving those 2 boxes for the shorter of the 3, 1 box for the one that's in the middle, and the tall one's good. And that accessibility, that word is used a lot, and people assume because I'm in disability services, I'm just using the word accessibility related to individuals with disabilities, but I'm not. Accessibility means the access. If you take the ability piece out and just have access, we want everyone to have equal or equitable access and be able to equally have representation in discussions, presentations, or activities, or programming, or classroom settings. So that's why some of us are already doing it. And I will say, you know, with COVID-19, we were all forced kind of online. And so things, maybe we didn't always put closed captioning on in our classrooms or when we did presentations, or maybe we didn't always have things that we would share or screen or email it. It was something we kept to ourselves as a lecturer or professor, or in different roles on campuses. But now we're doing more of those things. There's this flexibility and access to these things maybe that weren't as readily available. So I think it's important as we're showing students in the circle to start leading, as well as us, whether we're advisors or in higher roles related to ODK or on campuses, is to remind everyone we want that access for everyone. So everyone has that equal opportunity and that equity to be able to actively get the information, actively participate, and actively express their thoughts related to the dialogue, conversation, etc. So I thought this was a good visual to that piece. Does anybody know where the idea of UDL has come from? Does anybody know who kind of started it or the background information related to it? I'm gonna stop share for a second.
Don't see any hands raised, and no one's volunteering in the chat function just yet. Kimberly, I'm right there with you. I don't know the history of universal design either. I think there's some folks that are waiting. Oh, and Jennifer, it sounds like we lost your audio again. Jennifer? Jennifer? Yep, I'm trying to get her attention as well. We lost your audio again. Yep, there you go. Try it now. Yep, we can hear you now. Nope, you just muted yourself. There you go.
No, I got it. I was fixing the volume. We good
Yep.
now, everybody? I don't know what the deal is today. Thank you.
It's just one of those days. Technology has a mind of its own. So go ahead. You were going to give us the history of or the beginnings of universal design.
So did anybody hear what I was describing for the TED Talk? No, perfect. So it's very quick. There is a TED Talk that I love to show. It is an individual who happens to be male on the screen, and his interpreter who speaks for him, because he's hearing impaired and he's signing, is a female voice. He makes a joke about that in the beginning of his TED Talk, but we're not watching the beginning. It's a long TED Talk. I'm only doing a 2.5 minute snippet where he explains where universal design came from and kind of gives a visual. And I always like to preface this when I show it. It's okay to laugh at some of the visions on the screen that he shows you to depict universal design. And he makes a little bit of jokes. Sometimes people are uncomfortable when someone's making jokes about access or disability. He's trying to drive home the point of why universal design is important. So again, it's okay to laugh a little or chuckle to yourself. Fingers crossed you can hear the video when I do share screen. So hold on. You should be able to see a gentleman that is in a plaid shirt. I'm moving my screen so I can see Alexis. Excellent. Thank you for helping me with this. I'm going to push play. And then if it works, can you hear?
The one with the disability. So what is universal design anyway? There was a professor named Ron Mace who passed away a few years ago. He taught at the Center for Universal Design in North Carolina. And he said that universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, without the need for any adaptation or
Were
special.
you saying I had a sinister laugh? Is that what you said?
bit like that.
So humans interact with objects every day. And all these objects fall somewhere on the spectrum of universal design, from very universal to not at all. So let's use a doorknob as a common example. Doorknobs are not really usable by children. They struggle. People with arthritis struggle to use doorknobs. And this guy. So how could we improve on this design? Well, the door lever. It's a lot better. This guy can use it now. But think about people with wheelchairs. Have you ever seen them try to go through a door? It's horrible. It's really tough for them. Or parents with baby strollers. It's really difficult, not fully accessible. So to even improve upon the door design further, the automatic sliding door was invented. This is such a universal design, it doesn't leave anyone out. Even animals can use it. One of my projects recently was to work on something to make it more universally accessible. Do you remember when Google Glass came out? It was so exciting a few years ago.
I'm trying to stop the
No.
volume, so I
May it rest in
apologize for that.
peace. For the deaf. Now, neither of us can read.
So obviously this is a little different than the pants or everybody's in the same outfit, right? Like in the previous video. And so he's explaining kind of the background of where universal design came from and how things as simple as a doorknob went from this round thing to maybe a lever to these automatic doors. Thank you, Jess. Somebody just wrote, Jess Cooper wrote, makes so much sense. It does, right? Like to us in a room, when you see a video like that, it's like, oh, that's such common sense. But then when we're in our role, we're planning an event, we're planning a lecture, putting together a PowerPoint or a presentation, and hiccups come, like the technology with me today. What do you do? And did you think of all those other things to make sure everyone has that equity and everybody can have equal access, participation, and engagement? And so now I would like if Alexis can put us in two groups. Alexis and I don't have to be in the groups. But group one, I'd like you to think about how that applies to our general running of a circle. So how do we make it UDL to our circle being successful for our executive board, our leaders that run the circle? How do we make it UDL for our students that are brought into the circle and active participants? So how do we make our circle and our meetings and things that we do as a circle universally designed for everyone? And then for group two, I'd like you to think about how does UDL come into play when we're doing events with our alumni, having a panel of speakers, having a presentation, or representing ourselves within our campus community or our outside community. How would UDL come into play? So group one is more about our circle, and group two is our circle going out and doing those active things. Do you need anything from me, Alexis, to help with that?
Nope, I'm about to send folks out. So remember, group one, that's breakout room one. So if you're assigned to breakout room one, you're going to be focused on more of the internal circle programming. And breakout room two, you're going to be doing more external and outward facing and engagement with others, correct? Did I summarize those correctly?
And the group's going to be about 10 minutes. Everybody back? Did everybody populate almost?
That's it.
They're coming in. They're coming in.
There we go.
Yep, I think we have almost everybody back. So if we want to do some report outs from the
I like to
different
go in
groups.
reverse. So can we start with the big picture? So let's do group 2, what did you guys discuss more of the macro piece versus the micro piece of our individual circles? What did we come up with? What did we discuss?
So the first thing we kind of talked about was making meetings and such hybrid so that it's more convenient for people that are not in the circle necessarily. And if we wanted to bring in alumni or people just in the community, it would be more convenient for them. And we also talked about like using different methods of presenting so that everybody could get involved. For example, like recording the session so that people could go back and look over them and stop and pause and think about what's being said and covered. And then somebody also mentioned thinking about the time zone specifically, because early morning for us might not be early morning for some of the alumni. And then additionally, we also talked about making the areas accessible, because at least one person in the group mentioned that some of the meetings that they've been to, she goes with a friend that is in a wheelchair, and they always have to sit in the back because it's not, the room that they're in isn't accessible for them. So it kind of excludes them from the group.
Good job, team 2. Does group 1 have any thoughts about what group 2 talked about? Anything else they can think of related to those larger things? All good points. Kind of the other thing to think about related to space, right? Like if a room isn't accessible, and Alexis knows this because she worked with me and knows what my space looks like in the suite I work in. I obviously work with all different types of individuals that have different equipment. Figuring out if my office isn't the right space for an individual I'm meeting with, where's a different space I can meet them so we can have the meeting and they're comfortable and they don't feel like I'm moving furniture to provide that access to them. So if you're doing a room, how can you move furniture around so there are spaces for individuals with mobility equipment in the front and in the back? People always like to think, and this is because of my disability director hat, is they think if they're in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, they need to be right up front. Well, then they're doing this the whole time if there's a stage or something. Sometimes they need to be middle or back, so they are able to have their neck at the same position as those of us that aren't sitting for a presentation, right? So thinking through some of those things. I've been at concerts in session, they're trying to push the poor person straight up to the front and they're like this and they don't enjoy the concert. It's pushing them back, giving that autonomy that it's like being able to stand, right? And have our head level when we're looking at a stage or a presentation. Speaking of stages, if you ever do any kind of recruitment or award ceremony or sending off seniors or advisors, if you're gonna have something with a stage, you should have an alternative to that. If there isn't an alternative to get them on the stage, then move things down in front of the stage so they don't feel like it's this choppy transition. I work commencement at the university in my role, and people have very interesting ideas where individuals with special needs need to go on the floor or how they get across the stage. And Alexis knows that I'm very loud about that's not how we're going to do it. It needs to be seamless. They're part of our community and they blend in. Just like if someone is pregnant, someone is missing a limb, someone's using a cane or crutches, we always have that kid who breaks their leg right before graduation. So, you know, how do we make it blend in and it's seamless? And this is our community, everybody is involved. So thank you to the group too, talking about those larger things when alumni or speakers and such are involved. Who's speaking for group 1? What did you guys come up with? What did you discuss? No one from group 1.
So
There we go.
we talked a lot about, we were talking about how campus buildings are not accessible for people with mobility devices, and how doors, you know, we were kind of riffing off the doorknob analogy and saying, now, you know, even if there's a good knob, can the campus doors be opened by people who do have use of 4 limbs and people who might have something else that they're working with. So yeah, that was one thing we saw as a barrier to all of our members, is just ability to get in and out the doors of campus buildings.
Okay. Anything else you thought of besides just the building piece that you discussed?
What we also talked about was, as someone with a disability on campus, I've noticed a lot of times when there's accessibility things that I'm asking about, it seems like it's always like they seem like it's a burden, or they don't want to work with me to make it work. And so it's getting more people to understand what universal design is and how we can make that work. Because there's like so many times, like there was one thing that there was things I wanted to go to, and they said, oh, well, we would have needed to know weeks ago to make a bus that has a wheelchair accessible bus. And I even told them too that I was able to transfer. I didn't have to stay in my chair to get into the bus, but they told me I couldn't come because of that. And so it's kind of like just working with, so people have that better understanding of that from all angles, between peers and teachers and staff and things like that.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really sorry that's been your experience. That makes me really upset based on what I do and advocate. I don't like that. I come from more of a yes than a no spot. Alexis knows that. When I say no, I really mean it. I really try to come from a yes more than a no. So I'm sorry that's been your experience. But that's true, right? Like if you planned a trip, like the circle is going to Disney and we're going to travel, you know, I'm thinking Florida, not everybody in the group's in Florida, but that's a three and a half hour drive, especially if you're on a bus in traffic. So that thought process doesn't happen. And I'm glad you brought that up and shared, because that's kind of the next piece I wanted to kind of talk in the bigger group now that we finished the breakout, is thinking about mindfulness with any literature or advertisements that go out. So if you're going to have a trip with the group and you're discussing it and you're advertising it or you're fundraising for it, there should be a blurb that says, do you need any kind of considerations to participate? Do you need any kind of considerations to attend? But then we also have to be mindful as our circle or leadership, like I'm an advisor for the ODK circle at Nova, is I want to make sure we're always mindful of where that confidential information is going. It's unique because I'm the director of disability services, where I am the circle advisor. But if I wasn't in that role and I was just the advisor, I don't know if I want to hold that confidential information of a shared advisor with the circle or with our members. I want to make sure I'm making collaborations with the other offices on campus, whether it's accessibility, inclusion, different schools call it different things, but how can we collaborate together with the circle and get the needs of our recruiting members, our current members, our current advisors, to make sure everybody has that access and participation and engagement. And the same thing goes for if we're having speakers or larger scale events or doing community service and working with outside entities to meet a common goal of communicating how that happens. I was asked to participate in kind of it's called PPE, where we're doing the placement for students that want to go into college affairs kind of positions at different universities. And as someone who's participating as an administrator, they had on there, do you have a disability, yes or no? And then what accommodations do you need for your participation in the day? And I was like, hey, who created this form? Where is that going? Where is this information going? Sorry, I put my hat back on. This is concerning to me. I actually said it was problematic. So again, being thoughtful with our workflow and our process. Alexis is laughing at me because it was very problematic, because what was happening is we were leveraging our student leaders to take control of organizing that PPE, but they put that on the form. You shouldn't have, do you have a disability, yes or no? It should be, do you need any considerations to participate? And if so, this is who you contact. That way it wasn't private information going to a group of grad assistants. We love our grad assistants. They have places, we want them to graduate and do great things in the world, as well as our undergrads. But I don't think they should have private medical information about administrators, just like peer-to-peer shouldn't have private information about that, unless the individual is willing to share it. It shouldn't be documented on a form, whether it's electronic or printed out. And then something else people think about, I know we've kind of talked about disability or transfers or wheelchairs, but there's things like individuals might be pregnant and they can't walk long periods of time, or they have mobility equipment due to complications. There's other things that don't fall under ADA and specific disability to be thoughtful of. There's people with severe food allergies or anaphylactic shock when there's peanut butter on a sandwich and it's in the same bus, right? The car ride to Disney as our example. So just kind of being mindful of how we do that workflow of, we want you to participate. If you need considerations, how do we do that workflow? Where does it go? Where is that information housed, and how do we get what that person needs or connect them to the resources on our campus or the outside entity we're working with to make sure they don't have the experience that Elizabeth was sharing. We want to make sure that if they want to attend and participate, there's a way to do that in any part of the circle or event. Anything else anybody else can think about or wants to share? I think I have about 15 minutes or 14 minutes left. I'm trying to be mindful of my time while I'm talking. Okay.
Jennifer, just a quick, sorry, just a quick question.
And Betsy or
Maybe.
Betsy then Ashley.
If you could maybe like throw in the chat or later on follow up, I would love to hear sort of that statement or have that statement ready to go that you use in terms of what you can ask or should ask and the way to direct.
Sure. I don't have the official workflow, but I can happily make a slide for that. I was just talking to Alexis when you were in breakout rooms of how to upload the slides, because I'm going to share my screen in a second and show you some things. But I do have wording. I have it highlighted. I laugh. I just sent it to our campus life office last week because they're trying to figure out how to make sure Greek organizations on campus are being inclusive. The other thing is to think about, and I'm not going to get on this soapbox about it in a bad way, but animals, right? There's animals on campus for different reasons. And so we don't think about maybe Jen shows up with a dog because it's her service animal. And what does that look like? And where does the service animal come into play when it's in a smaller room or, you know, other concerns? So like people forget about those things too. It does tie to a disability, but there are animals that sometimes participate in things as well. And so navigating that has been interesting. So Greek Life just asked me for that. So I do have that. So Betsy, I'm happy to share that with the group. Ashley, what was your question?
Yes, I was just going to ask more on the outside of academics, since many of us may not be going into the academic world, you know, working or anything like that. How do we approach this in a more, in other workforces types of situations?
No, that's a great question. So it depends on kind of what the workforce role is or what the situation is. But again, it's kind of the similar idea of if you're doing a group outing, a team building, staff development, you're doing onboarding, how are all of those things being provided to the individuals who are expected to participate or encouraged to participate? So if you're doing onboarding and there's a bunch of paperwork or things, is it audio fillable, so an individual who can't hold a pen or maybe can't write is able to type or use electronic devices to type, or speech to text accessibility. Lots of us in our world, whether you're a campus administrator or you're working in an office, we might have PDF files or Adobe files. So making sure that accessibility is on, making sure you understand the accessibility in Word documents. Especially if you're doing trainings, right? I'm not sure how some workforces do it, but for us, if we're doing trainings, we have to log into our HR portal and there's PowerPoints or videos. And so again, those things we've been talking about is closed captioning on, is there a transcription? We didn't talk about transcriptions, but like the YouTube video of the TED Talk with the gentleman who is signing, I can download that transcription and then have it as a Word document and PDF. So I have it in 2 different ways as well as the video. So an individual could be watching the closed captioning using text-to-speech software. And there's also things like individuals with any type of vision impairment or color blindness, using color inversion. Is the accessibility an option on your websites or your portals for training or the things that you're showing? So again, that can apply in any kind of workforce. Normally in the workforce, you're going to have to work with either, if you're not the supervisor or your contact in the HR office of, hey, I want to make sure that this is universal for everyone. There's a huge kind of buzz of the things that I look at is neurodiversity and different thinkers and different engagement in different types of workers and how they're trying to apply universal design for those specific niches of new employees that they're onboarding. But I think it applies again of how do you do it for everyone? So if it works for someone on the autism spectrum, it will probably work for someone who's not. Just making sure those things are accessible to everyone and everybody has that ability to engage, ask questions, get the information the same way. We all learn different, right? Like if all of us in the room were the same, had no diagnosis of any kind or things that we own up to, we all, for me, math is a visual thing and I have to look at it. I have to see the whiteboard or the chalkboard and then I have to write it down. Other people can see it once and they have it. I envy those people. That is not me for math. but I can read a book and remember exactly what page I read it on, and not everybody can do that. That's why I was an English education major. So again, it's knowing our strengths and where we need a little extra help. I always give the example when I do a presentation is you have a professor with a PhD or an EDD, but they have a TA. They need help, we need help. So it's not a bad thing to ask for assistance so you can have that equal engagement and that equity in any of those places. Again, whether it's work, attending a conference, going to Disney, or doing a Zoom with a class. I think it all applies the same. Did that kind of help, Ashley, a little bit with your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Perfect. Again, it's kind of finding out the best way to navigate. I always say, you know, who's going to help me do the connections and get the yes. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen to go through some bullet points. It's not to talk on all of the information there, but I just want to be able to show some information. So this slide specifically has a lot of information. It's kind of summarizing what we've been talking about and in the populations it encompasses. Now, again, I am using the word students here because we're talking about like circle. We have students involved in the circle, but you can place it for human or individual because it's a person, right? Whether they have a disability, they speak English as a second language, they happen to be international, they're not in a traditional age range. We always say that the older individuals might not be as tech savvy. Listen, I'm somewhat tech savvy and I had problems today. So we all are different learners or different leaders at different times, have different styles. And then I want to talk about the website more than what specifically is showing as the 3 different brains with the 3 different colors. You might also notice when I put up something with a picture, I describe the picture because sometimes when you're in Zoom, if someone is using an accessibility software or reader for the screen, it's not always going to describe a picture. And if you didn't enable picture description, I try to do that when I'm speaking. So that's an example of something you can kind of put into your new bag of tricks when you're doing a presentation or talking to someone. So cast.org is like a great resource. And I think it's Rosemary who's writing a paper on UDL. It's a great resource. You might want to go there if you haven't. And understood.org talks about UDL as well. But UDL on the cast.org website does a lot of visuals, graphic organizers. They have things specific to the classroom, things specific to colleges, but again, it can apply anywhere. You can take the word student out, instructor out, and type in human or individual, and it's going to apply the same. And the idea is there's multiple means, and it's whether the engagement piece of how I interact with you by using breakout rooms, popping into the breakout room, not so good at looking at all the comments while I have all these windows up on my side of the screen, but Alexis has helped me with that, but navigating that so everybody feels they have the opportunity to engage just in different ways. And then having that action expression, right? We have reaction buttons in Zoom, Teams have reaction buttons, different platforms, Canvas, the same thing. Do they email you in Canvas? Or are they using Navigate/Grades First where they text you or email you? There's different ways to express their concern or have a dialogue. And then that representation of having links, having PowerPoints or pictures described, having it in multiple different formats. There's individuals who use technology where it does not read PDFs. It will read Word only because they might have older versions or not the most updated. So making sure you have things like a PowerPoint presentation or instructions or onboarding lists if you are in the workplace setting. So you have it in a Word document, you have it in PDF, and you have it as a printout as an example. I'm going to kind of skip through these slides where it talks about different ways to do things. It's mainly related to classroom, but again, we're talking if we had engagement with alumni or something and we had a Zoom while we were in a room together, there's ways to do that. The Do It organization is a huge resource. I reference it a lot. I will warn you, the videos are from like 1985 to 1995, so they look very outdated. It's okay to laugh because I go there and I'm like, please update this. You're a great resource. Get the videos a little more updated. But the content is the key piece. So I specifically picked areas related to universal design in college settings, but they have things like student support services. Well, if you take student out, support services, thinking of customer service in the workplace, right? We all have to have that professionalism and those different things when we're welcoming walk-ins or clients or whatever. So again, it's taking the content and seeing how it applies. And then the cast.org is a huge one. These are 2 of a gazillion things you can Google. If you put in UDL, you're going to get a lot of things. These are the 2 basic ones and the most information I gather from there. when I'm talking about universal design or figuring out universal design. There are some videos related to universal design that are quite long. They broke it out in 6 parts. They really drilled down from the big picture to the small picture of each of those 3 components of universal design. I think it's a great resource or something you can pop to. Again, it's related to classroom and higher ed, but I still think if you take the classroom piece out and you take the word student, it still applies. The content is still a good resource for what you might be seeking or looking at, and the videos are pretty good. In general, about accessibility, remember how I talked about access. These links are not because I have an individual that has a disability. It's not the Zoom accessibility is because someone is blind or deaf or has an amputee or something. It's related to accessibility for everyone. Sometimes people don't even know how to use the updated version of Word. There's microphone and speech to text there. There's ways to make your PDFs accessible. I just talked to a student that's trying to get registered for the fall and was like, you're the only one who has the PDF where I can fill it in so I don't have to write. I can't hold a pen. So it's just thinking about that. I'm glad I do, as my role when talking to that student is for disability services, but wouldn't it be nice as a student or a client that anything you download had that there and you didn't have to ask for it. I did have a little bit of how to use Canvas just in case anybody was interested to that. The last 2 bullet points are to Canvas. I have about 3 minutes left. I wanted to leave it open for any questions or anything I didn't cover. I did make a note of what I was asked about by Betsy. I will get that statement and include it.
And I know we've gotten a couple of questions about either the links or making the PowerPoint available. We are going to make sure that it is posted in the actual session, which you can still go back into EventMobi and download any of the files from any of the sessions. So we'll make sure that the PowerPoint's made available there this afternoon.
Elizabeth, I see. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine my role. I work with the university as a whole. I get a lot of professors are not making things accessible. This is another thing, whether you're in the workforce or classroom setting, when you take a snippet of an article or a book that you've scanned and you want somebody to read, if it's skewed, the individual that has assistive technology won't read it. And if you don't put on the accessibility features before you hit send, it's not accessible either. Again, not everybody thinks about that. If I didn't do my role, maybe I wouldn't have thought about that originally. Or if I was teaching high school and never did this in post-secondary, I wouldn't have thought about it. But again, being mindful of what you're sending. If you send it, can everybody have access to it? Is there more than one way for them to get the information? The other thing I like to do, and this is just me being me, and Alexis will laugh, but when I either send it to my class or I'm doing something where I'm sending an article for a breakout room to read or something like that, I make sure the link for the website that I took it from or extracted it from is available. So if they're not able to access it in the document I've sent, they can click on the accessible link and then they can try to navigate on the web link directly.
We do have about 1 minute left in the session. Any questions for Jennifer about anything that was discussed, or maybe a challenge that you've recently had in the circle and wanted to get some advice in terms of how to navigate it?
Well, while we're waiting to see, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Hopefully I gave you some food for thought. And like I said, I'm gonna work with Alexis and get everything uploaded so you can have that. And then I'll add what Betsy had asked me related to generic language that you can manipulate.
Well, I'm guessing that we've probably given you more to think about, that you know what to ask about just yet. As things come to you, just know that you can connect with Jennifer through EventMobi if you have questions specifically for her and want to follow up. Thank you, Jennifer, again for your time this afternoon and really broadening our horizons and thinking about how our leadership extends to all of those within our campus community and beyond, and our responsibility to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible. Please remember that there is a session evaluation that you can also access through EventMobi. Please complete those. It's really, really important. Putting my planning committee chair hat on for a second and asking for feedback so that we can continue to make this conference as relevant and informative as possible. If there are any questions related to the general conference, please continue to access the Leadership Lounge. Great place to connect with others. There's support specialists available there. And if you have any questions related to technology, please feel free to, through EventMobi, contact Tim Reed or Eric Wilkin, and they can answer any of those for you. As a reminder, we have our final keynote this afternoon. So we're all looking forward to that, and it will be then our conference closing. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Thank you, Jen, and have a great afternoon. See you guys soon.